Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. You could really help us by recommending us to your friends and family as well as share information on social media. Spread the word, people, spread the word. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 239 days, Ukraine stands strong against the forces of the Russian invasion. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that Russia has mined the dam and units of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant and are planning to commit a terrorist attack under Ukraine's flag, reports Ukrainska Pravda. In his address to the European Council, Zelenskyy said that this is one of the largest energy facilities. Its dam contains approximately 18 million cubic meters of water. If Russian forces blow up this dam, more than 80 settlements, including the city of Kherson, will be in the zone of rapid flooding. Hundreds of thousands of people could suffer, stressed the president. He also pointed out that it could destroy the water supply for a large part of Ukraine's south and leave the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant without water for cooling. The president added that such a catastrophe can even prevent the normal functioning of the channel constructed for providing Crimea with water. He called for an international monitoring mission to the power plant. Earlier, experts of the U.S. Institute for the Study of War reported that the Russians were preparing conditions to carry out a false flag attack on the Kakhovka power plant in order to justify or cover their retreat from the Kherson region. Later in his evening video address, Volodymyr Zelenskyy compared the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka power plant and its dam to the use of weapons of mass destruction. According to him, the consequences for Russia should be corresponding. Zelenskyy called on the world to act preventively, as the principle of preventive response to the security threats should finally become one of the basic principles of international politics. In his address to the European Council, Volodymyr Zelenskyy expressed belief that Russia's shelling of Ukraine's energy infrastructure is aimed at the energy blackmail of Europe, as well as provoking another wave of Ukrainian migration to the EU, reports European Pravda. The president reminded that until recently Ukraine used to export electricity to the EU, contributing to Europe's energy and price stability. According to Zelenskyy, the shelling is aimed at creating as many problems as possible with electricity and heating for Ukraine this autumn and winter, forcing as many Ukrainians as possible to seek refuge in the EU countries. The president called on the European Union to respond to this by enhancing Ukraine's air defenses and imposing stricter sanctions on Russia and Iran. In the same address, the president called on the leaders of the European Union to provide 3.5 billion euros this year for the implementation of urgent recovery measures in Ukraine, reports Interfax Ukraine. He added that Ukraine will need 14 billion euros next year. The president pointed out that so far Ukraine has received zero of these funds. Zelenskyy also asked the EU to speed up the transfer of the remaining 6 billion euros of macrofinancial assistance that was promised to Ukraine earlier. The General Staff of Ukraine believes that the threat of a new offensive on Ukraine from the territory of Belarus is growing, reports Ukrainska Pravda. The direction of the offensive might be different this time, targeting the western part of the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. The aim could be to interrupt main weapons and equipment supply routes used to deliver aid from Ukraine's western partners. The General Staff informed that Russia is continuing to deploy its aircraft and other military units to Belarus. Moreover, Belarus is continuing to undertake covert mobilization and to allow Russia to use its territory to launch its drones and missiles on Ukraine. The General Staff of Ukraine assesses that the situation on the southern and eastern fronts of Ukraine has escalated since mobilization was officially announced in Russia, but so far Russian forces have made no progress, reports LBUA. The main aim of the Russian troops is to reach the administrative borders of the Donetsk region while holding the occupied territories of Kherson, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia and Mykolaiv regions. The Russian commandment is hoping to use newly mobilized to stop the Ukrainian offensive in the Kherson direction and is concentrating additional forces there. Ukraine imposed sanctions against more than 2,500 individuals and almost 1,400 legal entities due to the Russian war against Ukraine, reports Interfax Ukraine. In particular, sanctions are imposed against Russian politicians, military personnel, public figures and oligarchs, including Putin's daughter Ekaterina Tikhonova. Sanctions are imposed against Russian banks, energy and industrial companies. Ukraine added to the sanctions list known Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, but sanctions will be imposed against him with a delay, reports Ekonomichna Pravda. Sanctions will come into force after the completion of the exchange of prisoners and bodies of those killed as a result of the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine. Abramovich earlier played the role of unofficial mediator between Kyiv and Moscow, including on the initiative to allow export of Ukrainian grain by sea. If you like what we do and would like to tip us, you can now do so directly to our PayPal. Check out the link in the description to this episode for more details. And as usual, you can subscribe to our Patreon. In gratitude for your help, we will give you access to a series of exclusive episodes on wartime life in Ukraine. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.